Welcome to the deep dive. When we talk about these huge conflicts, the strategies, the geopolitics, sometimes it feels so, I don't know, abstract, almost too big to really grab onto.
It really does. It's easy to lose the human element in all the maps and statistics.
Exactly. But what if we bring it right down to a single story? What if we start with someone like Private First Class Benjamin C. Schuster, 19 years old, from Williamsville, New York.
Right.
He joins the New York National Guard, 2nd Battalion, 101st Cavalry Regiment, ends up deployed to this city, Ramadi, that really became a crucible of the Iraq War.
A real focal point for the conflict.
And then February 25th, 2006, in Ramadi, he dies from a gunshot wound. His story, his sacrifice, and honestly the stories of so many others like him, they just remind you that behind every headline, every number, there's this incredibly profound personal cost.
That personal cost, it's devastating, but it also serves as this really potent reminder of, well, the sheer unpredictability of war, doesn't it? It's not always the big planned battle. Sometimes it's the everyday dangers, the unseen threats that can just appear out of nowhere, and change everything in an instant.
Absolutely. And that really leads us straight into our mission for today's deep dive. We're getting into the Second Battle of Ramadi. And look, this isn't just a dry military history lesson. We see it as a pivotal moment, one that gives you these really profound insights into, well, the brutal facts of modern warfare, the very messy, difficult art of counterinsurgency.
Yeah, Koi Oe, as they call it.
Right. And the impact, the lasting impact that this kind of conflict has on whole communities and, like we said, on individuals, people like PFC Schuster.
So we've gathered a whole stack of sources here.
We have historical accounts, military analyses, and some really powerful personal narratives, too.
And the idea is to kind of sift through all of that, right? Pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on this. We'll try to balance the big picture summaries with those memorable details, maybe some surprising facts, and, just enough perspective to keep you hooked.
Sounds good. Let's dive in. Setting the stage. The Iraq War and Ramadi's significance.
Okay, so let's start by painting that broader picture first.
Yeah.
The Iraq War itself. It kicks off, as most people remember, March 2003, U.S.-led invasion.
The stated goals were pretty clear at the time. Overthrow Saddam Hussein's regime, dismantle these purported weapons of mass destruction.
Right, and initially it looked like maybe it would be a relatively swift, conventional kind of war, but that changed fast.
Oh, it changed very quickly.
Yeah.
What happened was the initial invasion, it created this huge power vacuum after 2003.
Which is never good.
Never good. And it wasn't just an absence of authority. It became this, fertile ground for all sorts of sectarian militias, different insurgent groups. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI, they rose really quickly.
How did they manage that so fast?
Well, they were pretty skillful, actually, at exploiting the widespread discontent, especially among Sunni communities. These communities felt increasingly pushed aside, marginalized by the new Shia-led Iraqi government that was forming.
And our sources really highlight that this wasn't a problem with a quick fix, was it? It wasn't neat.
Not at all. The violence just escalated dramatically. It really peaked, you could say, around 2006, 2007. Just intense.
And that period, that really sets the stage for the kind of ferocious, grinding battles that came next.
Exactly. And right in the middle of all that chaos, Ramadi, strategically located there in Anbar province. It just emerges as this absolutely critical battleground for the U.S. military.
Why Ramadi specifically, though? Was it just the location?
Location was part of it, but to really get Ramadi's significance, you kind of have to look back a bit to Fallujah in 2004.
Right. The first Battle of Fallujah.
Well, both battles, really. The U.S. military's initial struggle to secure lasting control there, it kind of became symbolic of the broader challenges across the whole Anbar province.
How so?
That earlier setback, it just shattered trust, really fragmented the relationship between U.S. forces and the Iraqi civilians. And that, maybe inadvertently, created this opening for the insurgents.
They saw an opportunity.
They absolutely did. They capitalized on that broken trust, rallied local support, galvanized these extremist groups. It was really that breakdown that directly fed into Ramadi becoming this central hub for insurgent activity.
Yeah.
It sort of inherited Fallujah's unresolved issues,
Wow. Setting the stage for something even worse, it sounds like.
Pretty much, yeah. An even more intense fight.
So let's talk about Ramadi itself. What was the city like then? Our sources describe it as being under just immense pressure.
It was, population-wise, predominantly Sunni Arab.
Hmm.
And as we mentioned, this group felt really alienated by the new Shia-led government that came in after Saddam.
And that feeling of alienation, that was a major driver.
Oh, huge. A primary catalyst for the discontent. Then you add in pervasive unemployment, general socioeconomic instability just across the board after the invasion.
Creates fertile ground.
Incredibly fertile ground for insurgent recruitment, and just the sheer violence. Think about it. It disrupted everything. Daily life, schools, markets, just walking down the street became dangerous.
These people feeling hopeless.
Utterly hopeless. And tragically, that pushed some towards these insurgent ideologies that seemed to offer answers or maybe just a sense of belonging or revenge.
And the city itself, the layout.
That played a role too. Ramadi's dense urban layout, its geographical features, it made for a really complex environment. Easy for insurgent groups to operate, to hide, to thrive, really. And that just further entrenched the divisions that were already there.
Okay, before we get deeper into the battle itself, let's just circle back to that personal dimension we started with, because it connects right back here.
PFC Schuster.
Exactly. Private First Class Benjamin C. Schuster. Born in Williamsville, New York, he decides to join the New York National Guard, 2nd Battalion, 101st Cavalry Regiment.
And his deployment to Iraq, part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, the goal was stabilization after Saddam's overthrow, right?
That was the aim. But tragically, February 25th, 2006, in Ramadi, this city our sources are calling a center of insurgent activity, he dies from that gunshot wound.
And his sacrifice, like you said at the start, it just starkly highlights the dangers, the sheer unpredictability of military service in a place like that. The risks were often just far beyond what anyone might anticipate.
His legacy, though, reading the sources, it sounds like he was defined by courage, selflessness, a real sense of duty.
That comes through strongly. Highly regarded by his peers, his superiors. Known for being dedicated, professional, mentally strong, even in that incredibly volatile situation.
And his death, understandably, it sent shockwaves back home, didn't it? Through his community and beyond, it makes that cost of conflict suddenly very visible, very personal.
Absolutely. And the memorials, the tributes erected in his honor later, they ensure his name isn't forgotten. He becomes this symbol of unwavering devotion.
It really helps you move beyond just the cold statistics, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It illuminates the bigger picture of military service, the value of every single contribution, every sacrifice.
It's that timeless connection to the human side of war. It brings to mind that famous quote from Shakespeare's Henry V. You know the one? Before the Battle of Agincourt.
Oh, the St. Crispin's Day speech.
That's the one. From this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers.
For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Yeah, powerful
Good.
stuff.
It really underscores those enduring themes, doesn't it? Brotherhood, sacrifice, remembrance, things that are just so central to the whole military ethos, especially in combat. Forces involved, U.S. military and insurgent dynamics.
Okay, let's shift gears now and look at the forces actually involved in this period. On one side, obviously, you've got the huge structure of the United States military.
Right. Their basic role globally is projecting power, protecting interests, responding to threats. Pretty standard stuff on paper.
And our sources break down some key units involved in Ramadi, starting with the 1st Brigade Combat Team, 1st Armored Division. What exactly is a BCT?
So, a Brigade Combat Team, a BCT, it's really a core building block of the modern U.S. Army. The key thing to understand is that it's designed to be pretty self-sufficient.
Meaning?
Meaning it integrates different arms, infantry, armor, artillery, all into one cohesive fighting force. They can conduct what's called combined arms operations.
And that was important in Ramadi.
Hugely important.
Yeah.
That operational versatility was crucial in Ramadi's dense urban setting. It let them adapt, switch from high-intensity fighting to more nuanced counterinsurgency stuff as needed. Their deployments all over, Iraq, Afghanistan, they show that adaptability.
And then you have the elite units, Special Operations Forces, SOF, including the Navy SEALs.
Right. These are your highly trained, specialized operators, renowned for adaptability in unconventional warfare, direct action, counterterrorism, and critically, reconnaissance and intelligence gathering.
The Bin Laden raid in 2011 is probably the most famous example, right? Shows their precision.
Exactly. A prime example of their capability for these incredibly complex, high-stakes missions. In Ramadi, they were deeply integrated into the broader battle strategies. They weren't just off doing their own thing.
Working with conventional units.
Yeah, working closely with conventional units, with intelligence agencies. They also played advisory roles, helping train and equip local Iraqi forces. That shows their strategic flexibility.
What's the unique insight there? What do they bring that others don't?
Well, these small, agile teams, they act as what we call force multipliers. They can deploy rapidly into hostile areas and provide decisive advantages, maybe intelligence, maybe a precision strike, that larger conventional forces just can't achieve in the same way.
But it's not just the trigger pullers, is it? There's this massive supporting cast that makes it all function.
Oh, absolutely critical. You've got the U.S. Air Force, obviously, air superiority, logistics, crucial close air support for ground troops, reconnaissance. Indispensable.
Then the Marines.
Yep, the Marine Corps, often the first ones in with their amphibious assault capabilities, rapid reaction forces,
And the less glamorous but vital parts.
logistics and support units. Hugely important. Think military transportation command, maintenance units. They keep the supply chain moving, keep the vehicles running. You can't fight for long without fuel, ammo, food, medical supplies.
And intelligence gathering.
Paramount. You need accurate, timely intelligence. Units like the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, the National Security Agency, NSA, they provide that intel that shapes strategic decisions from the top generals down to the squad leader on the ground.
So it's really this complex ecosystem, a whole network of different capabilities.
Exactly. Our sources really emphasize that synergy. It's the inter-unit coordination, how they integrate their strengths, that's fundamental to understanding how modern warfare actually works, especially in a fragmented, messy place like Ramadi.
Now, to make these structures feel a bit more real, our sources actually include this incredibly powerful personal account from an author who volunteered for Iraq.
Right. The replacement's perspective.
Yeah. He volunteered, had just come back to infantry after 12 years in armor. Gets called up really fast, like 3 months after putting his packet in. And he specifically mentions meeting PFC Benjamin Schuster, who he started with, during training.
Where was that?
Camp Shelby, Mississippi. He talks about the training there.
What was that like, according to him?
Well, he says training days often ended by 4 p.m. A lot of administrative stuff, medical exams, but also these, quote, team-building activities at the All Ranks Club.
Right. Standard Army stuff.
But the core training focused on weapons and, importantly, communications. Things like the Sinchiar's radio.
Which is the standard secure military radio system.
Right. And the Blue Force tracker, which was pretty new then, wasn't it?
Relatively new, yeah.
Yeah.
A GPS system basically lets units see friendly forces on a digital map. Huge improvement for situational awareness, preventing friendly fire incidents.
So after Shelby, his journey continues. A week in Kuwait, and he mentions the weirdness of seeing McDonald's and Pizza Hut in 130-degree heat.
Huh. Yeah, those little bits of home in bizarre places.
Then a flight to Al Taqadum Air Base, or TK. And finally, this 5-ton truck ride into Ramadi. He describes the truck having steel welded to the sides for basic protection.
Not exactly an MRP.
Not at all. And he says this was his welcome to war, each soldier getting handed just 6 rounds, 5.56 millimeter bullets for their M4 rifles.
6 rounds, that's stark. Doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
No kidding. Yeah. He spends his first 2 weeks in transit barracks. Almost gets put back on an M1 Abrams tank because of his old qualifications.
His armor background.
Yeah. But ends up sent to the Scout Platoon, Headquarters 228th Division, as a replacement. And he's really blunt about how replacements were treated. Quote, "They didn't care much about me."
That's a tough way to start a deployment, feeling like an outsider.
He even recalls getting his Combat Infantryman's Badge, the CIB, a really significant award for infantrymen in combat, just sort of thrown at him by his platoon sergeant.
Thrown at him.
Yeah. The sergeant apparently said, "Don't brag, some of us haven't gotten it yet." And this same platoon sergeant, the author notes, quote, "sat in that very Bradley every night and never went inside the city because he was afraid."
Wow. That paints a picture, doesn't it? Shows the different ways the pressure affected people, even leaders. The fear was real.
His full combat mission sounds absolutely brutal. An introduction to the reality there. They were going after a high-value target.
How'd it go down?
Entered the house from the roof, kicked in 2 locked doors. Inside, the target. He initially looked like someone's grandfather.
But he wasn't.
No, he was running an AQI torture house in his garage. They found hooks in the ceiling, used for hanging people by their wrists, twisting their backs until they broke.
Just horrific. And the author had a background in juvenile detention, right? Worked with detainees.
Yeah, which makes the contrast even starker. He talks about that juxtaposition. And the constant threat, the IEDs. He describes the visceral fear of his first IED hit.
How did that happen?
Roadblocked by these things called bongo trucks. Device explodes right in front of them. The physical toll the next day, he says. Every muscle in my body aches.
The shockwave alone can do that.
And then a bigger one, disguised as part of the curb, actually lifted their Humvee off the ground. That's when he injured his neck.
Just relentless danger.
He also tells this story about finding buried caches in a house under construction. Artillery shells, grenades, AK-47s.
Common find.
He suggested booby-trapping them, rigging them to explode if insurgents came back for them.
But they wouldn't do that.
No, command rejected it. Too risky for kids potentially finding them. Which led to this moment he describes vividly. Him holding a live World War II-era grenade right next to 4 big 155mm artillery shells, just hoping another IED didn't hit nearby and set the whole thing off.
Incredible stress, just constant.
He finally left Iraq on June 15, 2006. His whole narrative, it just gives you this unvarnished, ground-level look at the daily fear, the psychological weight soldiers carried in Ramadi, makes the battle feel much more real than just pins on a map.
Absolutely. It humanizes the statistics profoundly.
Okay, so let's shift now to the other side, the insurgent forces. That post-2003 landscape in Iraq was really shaped by groups like Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI.
Right. They rose to prominence pretty quickly after the invasion, as we mentioned.
What was their core ideology? What were they pushing?
Their goal was basically to establish this puritanical Islamic state governed by their very extreme interpretation of Sharia law. And they were smart, tactically speaking. They exploited that Sunni discontent we talked about.
How?
By portraying themselves as the defenders of Sunni interests. Against the U.S. military, sure, but also against the new Shia-dominated Iraqi government. This approach, playing on tribal ties, sectarian grievances, it was really crucial for them gaining local support, especially in Anbar.
But their tactics were, well, incredibly brutal and controversial.
Extremely. Our sources highlight their heavy reliance on sectarian violence, specifically targeting Shia populations. They tried to frame it as a righteous struggle, but what it really did was just pour fuel on the fire. It exacerbated divisions, created this vicious cycle of revenge and retaliatory violence, tore communities apart.
That must have been a deliberate strategy, though.
Oh, absolutely. This dual strategy, appealing to Sunni grievances while violently attacking Shias, it served their purpose. It created chaos, undermined the government, and kept the conflict burning.
Then came a big change in 2006, right, with al-Zarqawi's death.
Yeah, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi's death in June 2006 was a major moment. It created a power vacuum within AQI. New leadership emerged, figures like Abu Ayyub al-Mazri and Abu Omar al-Baghdadi.
And they rebranded.
They did. They formally became the Islamic State of Iraq, or ISI. This wasn't just cosmetic. It was a clear move to claim greater legitimacy, and it signaled a much more ambitious vision, establishing an actual state, an Islamic caliphate, starting in Iraq.
And this wasn't just talk, they acted on it.
Definitely. It led to a real consolidation of power. ISI started systematically targeting local tribal leaders, anyone influential who might oppose them, to neutralize dissent.
Using coercion.
Coercion, intimidation, outright violence against anyone who resisted. And our sources note their tactics evolved. They became even more brutal and also more media savvy, using propaganda effectively. These were the methods that, chillingly, would really characterize the group later under Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi when they became ISIS.
And in Ramadi specifically, what did this ISI transformation mean on the ground?
It meant escalated violence. ISI's increased operational capacity, their heightened ideological fervor, it translated directly into more attacks, and they were ruthless. They targeted military forces, sure, but also civilians, almost indiscriminately at times. It showed this brutal disregard for life that really came to define their whole approach.
Destabilizing everything.
Completely. This cycle of violence just wrecked local governance, local security. Ramadi really became this microcosm of the larger, incredibly complex struggle that everyone, U.S. forces, Iraqi forces, civilians, was facing across Iraq. 3, the battle unfolds. Operations, tactics, and key incidents.
Okay, let's dig into how the battle itself actually unfolded. Looking at those initial engagements, the strategic shifts, roughly 2005 through 2006.
Right. This is when the 2nd Brigade, 28th Infantry Division, deployed into Ramadi. And at that point, the city had this grim reputation, most dangerous city in Iraq.
That wasn't just hype.
No, it was based on measurable increases in violence. Insurgent ambushes were frequent, IED attacks were constant, high-profile attacks were happening. They faced immediate, dynamic threats right from the moment they arrived.
So what was their initial approach? What did they try to do?
Well, their counterinsurgency efforts right from the start were kind of multifaceted. On one hand, yes, aggressive military operations, direct combat, intelligence gathering, trying to reduce AQI's ability to operate.
But not just fighting.
No. Critically, they also focused on community outreach. They started neighborhood patrols, tried to talk to people, tried to reassure them. They recognized that public perception was a huge issue, often fueled by insurgent misinformation, and that made it harder to maintain any kind of law and order.
And there was this whole civil affairs component too, wasn't there? Trying to build trust.
Hugely important. The brigade got heavily involved in that, trying to rebuild critical infrastructure, schools, medical facilities, roads, basic things needed to restore some sense of normalcy.
The idea being that stability undermines the insurgents.
Exactly. Socioeconomic stability was seen as crucial for cutting off insurgent support. Our sources really stress how vital improved relations between the U.S. military and local communities became, especially as many locals were actually getting fed up with AQI's brutal tactics themselves.
But while the U.S. was trying to build trust, AQI was actively working against it.
Relentlessly. They had a very calculated strategy. Target tribal leaders, target police recruits, anyone seen cooperating or potentially cooperating with the Americans or the Iraqi government.
Why them specifically?
To sow division and fear. To make it clear that working with the occupiers or the puppet government carried a death sentence, it fundamentally eroded local trust and made it incredibly difficult to build up an effective local police force.
And the violence got worse.
It reached a fever pitch in late 2005. Brutal assassinations, public executions. These were stark warnings. It really highlighted a key lesson. Winning the peace wasn't just about military victories, it required winning the trust of the population. And that was a battle fought culturally as much as militarily.
This difficult situation then leads to a major strategic shift, right? With Colonel Shawn McFarland taking command.
Yes, McFarland's arrival was pivotal. He introduced this new counterinsurgency doctrine that became really influential. It wasn't just about clearing insurgents out anymore.
It was the clear hold build strategy.
Exactly. 3 phases. First, clear an area of active insurgents. Second, hold it, maintain security, prevent insurgents from coming back. And third, critically, build local capabilities, Iraqi police, army, governance, so they could eventually take over.
That sounds like a fundamental shift in thinking.
It was profound. The emphasis moved towards civilian cooperation, strengthening local government, integrating the military effort with reconstruction and development. It was an understanding that military wins had to be consolidated politically and socially. You needed more than just firepower.
And part of this was establishing new kinds of bases.
Yeah, the strategic establishment of community outposts, or COPs, small bases, pushed out into the neighborhoods, not just big fortified FOBs, forward operating bases.
Why was that important?
It fostered continuous interaction with the local population, soldiers living among the people, essentially. It helped gather intelligence, build rapport, directly counter insurgent propaganda by offering a visible, hopefully positive alternative. It was about presence.
And intelligence became even more central.
Absolutely. Intelligence-driven operations became the norm. Seamlessly integrating intelligence gathered on the ground with kinetic strikes, airstrikes, raids.
Using new tech.
Utilizing advanced surveillance, especially drones, reconnaissance units, to get real-time information. This allowed for quicker reactions, better strategic planning, and importantly, more precise strikes. The goal was to minimize collateral damage while still hitting the insurgents hard. A move towards precision, recognizing that hitting the wrong house could undo weeks of painstaking trust building.
Okay, let's zoom in now on some specific operations and tactics used during that key period, June to October 2006.
Right. Our sources detail several major offensives. The Ramadi offensive itself was a big one, a really concentrated effort to recapture parts of the city.
What did that involve?
Ground incursions, constant patrols, strategic strikes, targeting insurgent networks. It was robust, classic urban warfare in many ways.
And this was part of the larger fight for Anbar province.
Exactly. The struggle for control of Al-Anbar was ongoing. This period saw intense house-to-house searches, coalition troops trying to root out insurgents who were deeply embedded in the urban landscape.
Did it work? Was it successful?
Well, territory was reclaimed, yes, but resistance often increased in response, and civilian casualties. That was a huge, unavoidable challenge in dense urban fighting.
Which impacts legitimacy.
Directly. It really underscored how difficult it is to achieve military objectives while also keeping the local population on your side, a constant tension.
You mentioned intelligence and air support earlier. How did they work together during these offensives?
They really acted as force multipliers. Intelligence gathering combining human intelligence from local sources, SIGINT signals intelligence from intercepted comms. Aerial recon gave commanders vital real-time battlefield pictures.
Which allowed for?
Preemptive strikes, significant tactical advantages. For example, a precise airstrike could take out a key insurgent leader, disrupting their whole network. UAVs, drones provided that persistent eye in the sky, which was invaluable in such a fluid environment.
But there were downsides to relying on air power.
Definitely. A critical lesson learned was that while effective, it carried significant risks. Collateral damage from airstrikes, even accidental ones, could alienate locals instantly. It really complicated that whole hearts and minds effort. It was always this delicate balancing act.
And then there was the incident involving the Ramadi General Hospital. Why was that significant?
Strategically, it was seen as important because coalition forces believed insurgents were using it. Maybe for coordination, maybe as a sanctuary to treat wounded fighters, maybe just to blend in.
No, they captured it.
They did. And from a purely tactical view, it was a victory. It allowed them to monitor who was coming and going, disrupt potential insurgent activity, and just signal a strong coalition presence in the heart of the city.
But how did the local population see it?
That's the crucial part. Many residents viewed the hospital as a neutral safe space, a place off limits to the fighting. So when coalition forces occupied it, it generated deep mistrust, even anger.
So the military had to respond to that backlash.
Immediately. They had to shift focus quickly, try to restore medical services, provide humanitarian aid, basically try to undo the damage to trust. It showed how even a tactical win could have these complex negative ripple effects politically and socially. Another hard lesson in urban warfare. Even obvious military targets can have huge symbolic meaning for civilians.
Now we need to talk about something truly disturbing from this period. The use of chemical weapons.
Yeah.
Specifically, chlorine bombs.
Yeah, this is a really grim chapter, and it brings back some dark history.
Chlorine wasn't new as a weapon, right?
Not at all. It was first weaponized on a large scale back in World War I. German forces used it at the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915. The effects are horrific, severe respiratory distress, choking, often death. It led to international bans like the Geneva Protocol in 1925 and the Chemical Weapons Convention more recently.
But despite those bans, it reappeared in Iraq, used by insurgents.
Shockingly, yes. Especially chlorine bombs. These were often crude devices, basically repurposing industrial chlorine, which is commonly used for things like water purification.
Why would insurgents use something like that?
Well, it's about asymmetric warfare. They lacked the conventional firepower of coalition forces. Chlorine was relatively easy to obtain. And crucially, it wasn't just about the physical casualties. It was incredibly potent psychological warfare.
How so?
Designed to instill widespread fear, panic, to destabilize governance, make people feel unsafe anywhere, anytime, to erode any sense that the government or coalition forces could actually protect them.
And this was happening in Ramadi.
The reality was grim. Reports indicate extensive use of chemical agents, particularly chlorine bombs. And because they were often crude devices, like car bombs packed with chlorine tanks, they were incredibly indiscriminate.
Meaning civilians were hit hard.
Disproportionately hard. The health consequences were severe: acute respiratory problems, neurological issues, horrific skin lesions, and many long-term chronic illnesses. Civilian casualties from these attacks were alarmingly high.
What did that do to the healthcare system?
Overwhelmed it. Local hospitals are already struggling, and then suddenly they're dealing with mass casualty events involving chemical exposure. And psychologically, it just shattered communities, fostered this lasting fear and hostility towards everyone involved in the fighting, including the coalition forces trying to stop the insurgents.
This must have created huge dilemmas internationally, ethically.
Absolutely. Within the military, there were debates. Is there any conceivable operational advantage to using these things versus the massive downside, the violation of global norms? The international outcry was immediate. Condemnation was swift. Using chemical weapons carries huge diplomatic repercussions.
And what about the troops on the ground? How did it affect them?
It added this whole other layer of fear, didn't it? The constant threat of an invisible, unpredictable chemical agent. It profoundly affected morale. Soldiers had to worry not just about bullets and IEDs, but about gas attacks. It also, understandably, led to increased skepticism sometimes about command decisions regarding protection. And globally, it raised public awareness, fueled advocacy for accountability, just a horrific element that really highlighted the unpredictable, often depraved nature of modern conflict. 4. The Anbar Awakening. a pivotal shift.
Okay, let's move on to something that represents a major turning point in the conflict, the Anbar Awakening. How did this whole thing start? Our sources point to some very specific trigger events.
Yeah, it wasn't just one thing, but a key spark, believe it or not, was the execution of a tribal leader named Sheikh Abu Ali Jassim. This happened back in June 2005, carried out by AQI.
Why was his death so significant?
Jassim was a well-respected Sunni tribal leader, and he had been openly opposing AQI's brutal tactics, their heavy-handedness in his area. Killing him wasn't just another act of violence. It was an attack on the traditional power structure, on tribal authority itself.
And that backfired on AQI.
Big time. It caused media unrest, sure, but more importantly, it galvanized other tribal leaders across Anbar. It starkly showed them that AQI wasn't a protector, but an oppressive, alien force that disregarded their traditions and authority. It revealed the potential for a much broader collective resistance.
So who stepped up to lead this potential resistance?
A figure named Sheikh Abdul Sattar Abu Risha emerged as a really crucial catalyst. He managed to consolidate the efforts of these various, often rival Sunni tribes who were all getting fed up with AQI.
And he formed a council.
Yes, in September 2006, he formally established the Anbar Salvation Council. This was a coalition aimed specifically at collective action against the insurgents, but also, importantly, aimed at trying to rebuild the social fabric of the province that AQI was tearing apart.
And this led to them cooperating with the U.S. military.
It did, which was a huge shift, right? This was a deeply pragmatic adaptation. The U.S. forces, who were initially seen with deep suspicion, maybe even as occupiers,
Suddenly became potential allies.
necessary allies. The tribal leaders realized they were facing an existential threat from AQI. They understood that cooperating with the U.S. military, even temporarily, was essential for their own survival and for restoring some kind of local governance.
Did this alliance actually work? Did it produce results?
It led to some very tangible successes, yeah. Intelligence sharing became key. Tribal fighters knew the local terrain, knew the people, knew who was who. They started feeding information to U.S. forces.
Which led to operations against AQI.
Exactly. Successful operations against key AQI leaders happened throughout 2007. This significantly destabilized the insurgents' influence in Anbar. It started to bring back a fragile sense of normalcy, or at least reduced violence to some communities. This cooperation was a critical and, frankly, pretty surprising turning point in the war there.
But our sources also caution that this coalition wasn't exactly rock solid. It was fragile.
Very fragile. You have to remember, there were still deep underlying resentments, a lot of skepticism about American long-term intentions. The tactical win against AQI didn't magically solve all the political and economic problems that fueled the conflict in the first place. It left the door open for future instability, which we saw later.
So let's unpack the impact of this Anbar Awakening on the insurgency itself. It fundamentally changed the dynamics, didn't it?
Yeah.
AQI's own tactics kind of backfired.
They really did. AQI's brutality, which initially maybe resonated with some disenfranchised Sunnis, ended up alienating the very tribal leaders whose support, or at least tolerance, they needed.
How so?
Tribal leaders just got fed up with the violent repression, the arbitrary executions, the heavy-handed taxes or exactions AQI imposed. They started seeing AQI not as fellow Sunnis fighting for a cause, but as this foreign oppressive force disrupting their traditional way of life, undermining their authority.
And that led to a collective decision.
Yes, a collective decision to mobilize against AQI. Sheikh Abu Risha's leadership was crucial in bringing these disparate tribes together. And it's striking, isn't it? The insurgency, through its own excessive violence, basically sowed the seeds of its own near destruction in Anbar.
This led to a massive shift in allegiances on the ground.
Huge shift. Local loyalties just pivoted away from the extremist groups towards these new tribal coalitions like the Anbar Awakening Council. It was the surge of sort of self-determination, tribal pride, reclaiming their cultural identity, taking control back.
Are there specific examples of this shift?
Yeah, our sources mention Sunni families even in Fallujah, a city that had seen intense fighting against U.S. forces just 2 years earlier, now actively cooperating with U.S. forces to kick AQI militants out of their neighborhoods. A really remarkable turnaround in local attitudes.
And this awakening changed local governance, too. Security.
Substantially. It marked this pivot from an environment dominated by insurgents to one where community-led security initiatives started taking root.
This is where the Sons of Iraq come in.
Exactly, the Sons of Iraq program. These were essentially community-based security forces, mostly made up of local tribal members, paid initially by the U.S. military to guard their own neighborhoods. Checkpoints, local patrols.
And the U.S. supported this.
Increasingly so, yeah. U.S. forces recognized their effectiveness, especially in providing local intelligence and presence. They started supporting these groups, which fundamentally redefined the power dynamics in Anbar. It wasn't just about U.S. troops anymore.
And the tribal councils?
They started rebaiting authority, too, negotiating local disputes, mediating conflicts, laying the groundwork for a more sustainable, bottom-up form of governance rooted in traditional structures.
So this was really about local identity, local agency.
That's the crucial insight. It was a powerful assertion of local identity. Traditional tribal leadership was revitalized. The Sons of Iraq program, for all its later problems and complexities, it really fostered this sense of local ownership over security. It showed that governance could be an organic, community-driven process, maybe much more effective long-term than a top-down imposed solution.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Did old rivalries reappear?
Oh, for sure. As the Awakening Councils gained power and influence, some of the old tribal rivalries did resurface. Conflicts over resources, influence. But often the shared interest in keeping AQI out helped temper those conflicts, at least for a while.
So the big takeaway from the Anbar Awakening.
The overarching lesson seems to be that sustainable peace, especially in these kinds of complex, tribally influenced environments, it really requires active local community involvement. It challenged that long-held reliance on just big military interventions. It suggested that maybe external support should focus more on empowering local authority structures rather than trying to impose solutions from the outside. A crucial insight for future conflicts, really, the enduring consequences, impact, and lessons learned.
Let's turn now to the aftermath. The enduring consequences of all this intense fighting on the soldiers, on the civilians. The human toll, just looking at the numbers, is staggering.
It's sobering. Our sources give the statistics. In Ramadi, during the second battle period, over 100 American fatalities, several hundred insurgent casualties, likely many more uncounted.
And that's just Ramadi. Broaden it out to the whole Iraq war.
And you're looking at over 4,400 U.S. service members killed. Tens of thousands wounded, many with life-altering injuries. It's a massive cost.
And those are just the physical casualties. What about the invisible wounds?
Just as profound, maybe more pervasive, our sources really highlight the prevalence of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Estimates hover around 20% for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, plus high rates of depression, anxiety, substance abuse issues among those who returned.
It's hard to quantify that suffering.
It is. There's a pseudonymized account in the sources from a Sergeant John Smith. He talks about the chilling unpredictability, the constant calculation of risk they faced every single day, and his feeling, years later, even now I carry those days with me. It's a powerful reminder that the war doesn't just end when the deployment is over. It reshapes lives permanently.
And then there are the civilians, caught right in the middle.
Truly at the epicenter. The estimates for Iraqi civilian casualties vary widely, but we're talking several 100,000 deaths over the course of the war and over 4 million people displaced from their homes. Just imagine the scale of that disruption.
Shattered lives, fractured communities.
Generations starred by it. The sources share some incredibly powerful civilian stories that really personalize these numbers.
Like who?
Fatima, a school teacher, her school was bombed. She talks about having to adapt her lessons to include safety drills, teaching kids what to do when they hear sirens. Omar, a shopkeeper, describing deserted markets, the complete collapse of the local economy. His life became just about surviving day to day.
Just heartbreaking.
Aisha, a mother, telling how her children were terrified by the constant gunfire, how she lied to them, saying it was just firecrackers trying to shield their innocence. You can feel the psychological burden she carried.
Any others?
Jamal, a farmer, watching tanks roll across his land, making it unusable, leading to food shortages. And Miriam, an elderly woman who, despite seeing her beautiful city destroyed, still held on to this incredible hope for the future. It shows this extraordinary human resilience, but also the depth of the suffering. These stories show how war just completely redefines every single aspect of civilian life.
Beyond the human cost, there was the physical destruction.
Immense. Hospitals, schools, power grids, water systems severely damaged or destroyed. This led to a massive deterioration in living conditions, chronic power outages, poor healthcare access, education disrupted for years. Getting clean water became a major struggle, increasing the risk of disease.
And politically, socially.
The war just massively exacerbated those pre-existing sectarian divisions we talked about. It arguably catalyzed the rise of even more extreme groups like ISIS down the line. It perpetuated these cycles of violence and deep mistrust between communities that are still being dealt with today.
So looking back at all this, what did it mean for military tactics, for strategy, Did Ramadi and Fallujah before it actually change things?
Oh, absolutely. Our sources are clear. These battles forced a really critical reevaluation within the U.S. military, a fundamental shift away from purely conventional thinking towards much more sophisticated counterinsurgency, or COIN, tactics.
What were the key shifts?
Several big ones. Civilian protection became a much higher priority, at least on paper. The whole hearts and minds concept, realizing you couldn't win militarily if you alienated the population.
Working with local forces.
Huge emphasis on joint operations, partnering with Iraqi security forces, leveraging their local knowledge, trying to build legitimacy for the Iraqi government.
Intelligent.
Operations became heavily intelligence-driven, integrating human, SIGINT, aerial surveillance to allow for more targeted operations, fewer large-scale disruptive sweeps.
And adapting the equipment, the tactics.
Yeah, adaptive tactics. The widespread adoption of mine-resistant ambush-protected MRAP vehicles was a direct response to the IED threat. Using precision artillery, carefully coordinated airstrikes to try and minimize collateral damage.
And the non-military side.
A much greater focus on community engagement and development. Things like youth employment programs, vocational training, infrastructure rebuilding, trying to offer tangible alternatives to joining the insurgency. It was a recognition that security and development had to go hand in hand.
What did the commanders themselves say they learned?
They reflected deeply on the need for adaptability, recognizing that this kind of warfare required not just firepower, but also psychological operations, information warfare to counter insurgent propaganda. They talked a lot about that difficult balance between using force effectively and minimizing civilian harm. And the absolute crucial importance of logistics, keeping the troops supplied, supported, became incredibly clear in these prolonged, complex urban fights. The big lesson: successful COIN needs a truly holistic approach.
Let's talk about the development of the Iraqi security forces, the ISF, and the police. Building them up was a major goal, right?
A central goal: establishing a capable, well-trained, reliable local military and police force that could eventually take over security for the country.
How did they approach recruitment and training?
They aimed for inclusive recruitment, drawing from different backgrounds, former military, tribal groups, civilians. Training programs were meant to be pragmatic: tactical skills, weapons handling, COIN methods, but also, crucially, things like human rights, rules of engagement. The train-the-trainer model was key, teaching Iraqis to train other Iraqis to build that self-sustaining capacity, essential for long-term autonomy.
Getting them into the fight wasn't easy.
Far from it. They were integrated operationally alongside coalition forces, but there were huge initial challenges: equipment shortages, leadership issues, corruption, sectarian biases, and just the immense psychological toll of intense combat. Their readiness was often very inconsistent.
But having them there was still important.
Yes, for providing that visible local security presence and potentially reducing the exposure of coalition troops. But it was a very rocky road.
What were the biggest hurdles they faced?
Corruption was pervasive, especially within the police. Bribery, lack of accountability, it massively undermined public trust. Loyalty issues were huge, too, often along sectarian lines. Units might favor their own group, creating internal divisions. Resources were often inadequate. Training quality varied wildly. And the constant churn of coalition advisors made long-term, consistent development difficult. These were deep, systemic problems.
But were there any successes? Did parts of it work, especially in police development?
Yes, despite the challenges, there were areas of progress. Some police units started adopting community policing strategies, trying to build trust locally. Think along the lines of programs seen in places like Minneapolis, aimed at reducing crime through partnership.
Technology played a role.
It did. Things like body-worn cameras started being introduced, which studies have shown can reduce use of force incidents and increase accountability. Predictive policing software, real-time crime mapping, these tools helped make responses more proactive, more efficient.
Specialized units.
Yeah, establishing specialized units for complex crimes, narcotics, human trafficking, cybercrime allowed for more focused expertise, like task forces you see in the U.S., such as LAPD's efforts.
Training improvements.
Definitely an increased emphasis over time on things like de-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity training, dealing with mental health crises, mirroring initiatives in places like Houston TD, and joint task forces, bringing different agencies together, proved effective against complex criminal networks like the Global Internet Crimes Against Children task forces.
Did these improvements build confidence in the ISF?
Incrementally, yes. Certain units really started to prove their capability. The popular mobilization forces, despite being controversial, played a key role against ISIS in places like Tikrit and Fallujah later on. And the Counterterrorism Service, CTS, formed back in 2003, really evolved into a highly capable, respected force. Their performance in liberating Mosul from ISIS in 2016-17 was critical.
So perception shifted.
It did, from widespread skepticism towards seeing some Iraqi units as genuine protectors. This built pride within the forces, fostered a growing sense of ownership. It showed that building genuine local capacity was possible, even if the path was incredibly difficult and uneven.
So fast forward, Ramadi today, as of 2023. What's the situation? Our sources paint a picture of a city still recovering, still fragile.
That seems accurate. It's a city bearing the deep scars of conflict. There's been progress in rebuilding, yes, but huge challenges remain.
Including security challenges.
Definitely. The rise of ISIS around 2014 brought Ramadi back into the crosshairs. They capitalized on those lingering grievances the security vacuum left after the 2011 U.S. withdrawal. IS actually seized control of Ramadi in 2015?
Before being pushed out again.
Yes. After another hard-fought battle by Iraqi security forces with coalition support later that year. But even after that military success, Ramadi entered this really complex, ongoing cycle of recovery and simmering instability. IS cells, though weakened, remain a threat.
What are the other ongoing challenges?
The continued presence of various armed groups, not just IS remnants. Difficulties in intelligence gathering because trust is still so fragmented. The social landscape remains incredibly complex, making effective counterinsurgency very hard. Lasting peace feels elusive.
And economically? Socially?
The war's destruction hit the economy hard. Widespread unemployment, especially for young people. Reconstruction efforts have been plagued by endemic corruption and mismanagement, which just fuels frustration among people who aren't seeing improvements in their daily lives.
Geopolitics plays a role too.
Massively. Ramadi, like much of Iraq, is caught up in broader regional power struggles. Iranian influence, ongoing sectarian tensions within Iraq, the shifting policies of foreign powers, it all casts a long shadow over local stability.
And those root causes of discontent, are they still there?
Many of them persist, yes. Ideological motivations, extremist narratives, they still find traction among disenfranchised youth who feel they have no future. It really emphasizes that you need holistic solutions. You can't just solve this with military force. You have to address the underlying social, economic, and political drivers of extremism.
Are there efforts to do that? To build resilience?
There are. Initiatives aimed at strengthening communities against insurgent influence, efforts to make local governance more inclusive, bringing in leaders from different groups. And international aid remains vital, helping reestablish basic services, create jobs, trying to rebuild that social contract and offer hope. But it's a long, slow, painstaking process.
So if we pull all the way back now, the overall lessons learned from Ramadi, from the entire Iraq War, what stands out?
Well, it's undeniable that the war just profoundly reshaped Iraq. Fragmented sectarian relations, persistent political instability, rampant corruption, economic devastation, environmental damage, and the staggering loss of human capital. A societal unraveling in many ways.
And the definition of victory had to change.
Absolutely. The overarching insight is that true victory isn't just about winning battles. It's about the much harder, longer-term tasks, establishing effective governance, fostering real social cohesion between groups, creating genuine economic opportunity for people.
And Ramadi's impact on military thinking?
It fundamentally shaped U.S. military doctrine. That shift towards comprehensive counterinsurgency, integrating political, social, cultural factors that became central, largely because of the hard lessons learned in places like Ramadi and Fallujah.
What about handing over responsibility?
The transition imperative. That's a critical lesson. You need a clear plan, a realistic timeline, and robust, sustained support for transitioning security responsibilities to local forces. Pulling out too soon or without adequate support can just undo everything and restart the cycle of violence.
And the ethical question.
They remain sharp. The ethical dimensions of intervention, protecting civilians, ensuring accountability for actions, the proportionality of force, especially airstrikes in urban areas. These are dilemmas that have no easy answers but must be confronted.
And ultimately, it comes back to the people.
Always. The human experience, those personal stories of fear, of bravery, of camaraderie, of profound loss, of incredible resilience from soldiers and civilians alike. They are absolutely foundational. You can't understand the true cost or complexity of conflict without centering those human stories.
So the final takeaways.
The enduring importance of being adaptive, of psychological preparedness for troops, of building cohesive units. and the absolute necessity for multidimensional solutions that go way beyond traditional military thinking. Ramadi really serves as this microcosm of modern warfare's challenges. Its legacy provides crucial, hard-won insights for future conflicts, and it continues to shape the debates we have today about using force and the incredibly difficult work of building lasting peace.
Outro. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive.
Hmm?
We've really journeyed through the immense complexities of the Second Battle of Ramadi, haven't we? Exploring that intricate mix of military strategy, raw human experience, and those shifting geopolitical realities.
Yeah, and understanding events like this, it isn't just history for history's sake, is it? It's about getting a handle on the complexities of the global challenges we face right now. The lessons from Ramadi, they're still relevant. They inform military thinking, humanitarian work, how we even understand conflict today, often in ways you might not expect.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. As you reflect on this deep human cost, this intricate dance we've discussed, military power and the needs of a community in a place like Ramadi, what new questions does this raise for you about how nations navigate conflict and how we can actually truly build a peace that lasts?